Hey everybody, Ali here with the Lead with Meaning podcast. I am so excited to finally be talking to my good friend Suzanne Hopkins. Suzanne, for those that don't know, was the one that really pushed me and motivated me to get out of my comfort level and have these conversations. And I've told your story, Suzanne, so many times because I don't think most people realize how uncomfortable I am in putting myself out there. And when you and I met, we were trying to engage in business partnership. And, early on, he says, hey, I don't know if I have budget for your product, but if you're patient with me, I'll open up doors. And you definitely did. We spent, I want to say, more than 6 months, less than 9 months, kind of opening up a lot of doors. And when a new opportunity presented itself, you asked to talk candidly and you said, hey, what are you doing to get some of these messages out there? And here we are about a year later, and I wanted to make sure that we got you on the show and introduce you and a lot of what you're doing to the audience. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're completely blowing me away right now with these nice compliments and words. It does remind me though that it was probably a pretty hellish sales cycle for you when we first back in those early days when we were trying to get something done. So note to self, be a better client, not just making intros.
Well, no, I think especially in sales, I've seen a huge shift in the community. There's so many great sellers that are really trying to push with value and really trying to build relationships. We hear a lot of that empathy, compassion, lead with value. And I think this was a good example of the both of us really investing in each other and in doing so. And at least in my mind, it's become a great friendship. And, every time we connect, I learn more and I'm always excited. So, I applaud you. But, when we met, you were, Suzanne, 15 plus years, as a sales leader, and it's not, it's uncommon for a woman to spend that long in an organization. So one of the questions I really had was, as a sales leader who did spend 15 years kind of in a corporate environment, what did you see change from kind of a woman's perspective and from a leadership perspective? And maybe you could share a little bit of that story.
Absolutely. No, I'm excited because I think with the perspective I have now looking back, there really has been so many things that have changed. And I've been very lucky because when I started actually with The Economist, the CEO at the time was a woman. And, she was just beloved in the organization and a charging CEO that really gave me a vision of what's possible. So I think that was kind of the earliest experience I have of women in leadership was in the company that I had just started to work for. It was one of the things that actually drew me to The Economist at the time. And unlike, I think, Fortune 500 companies now, where there's only like less than 10%, I think, of female CEOs, in my tenure at The Economist, I had 3 female CEOs. And actually, the editor-in-chief was also, excuse me, a female. Yeah. So I've really had the opposite in terms of, an ability to kind of see her, be her, which I think is a big part of what has changed over the course of the last decade. When I first imagined what it would be like to work in business, I don't think I had these same pictures, of what female leadership looked like. And, when that started to emerge, it only looked one way. Yeah. And it looked very similar to, what the definition of male leadership was. So I feel like that whole concept of leadership has evolved. And rather than just even thinking about it as men and women, I really think that the focus on diversity and inclusion has made it more important for people to focus on having just a better understanding of everybody's unique human experience. It really isn't, because female leadership looks very different depending on what your economic background was and, sure, what school you went to. And I feel like that's starting to be better understood now that, leadership can come in all shapes and sizes. And, that makes for really good business because you have a lot more touch points with, your employees and your customers. And I just feel like it's advanced in a really positive way.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, Suzanne, because you started as an individual contributor. Like when you joined The Economist, were you looking at leadership, or were you just because you had the opportunity to see some great leaders in front of you? Was that something that you just saw an opportunity for you to kind of build on your career? And like, how did you transition as a young sales rep, working your way up the ranks, saying, hey, I really feel like this is an organization that is going to enhance my growth and development. And the reason I ask is just for younger folks, maybe earlier in their careers, male or women, as we talked about, how do we ensure that we're thinking about, our right trajectory with our career? And I was curious to see, maybe you could share a little bit of that at The Economist.
Absolutely. And again, I've been really blessed to have people in my life that, where I invested my time and tried to deliver value, that was reciprocated. And two women in particular at The Economist that were in sales management really kind of nurtured me and took me under their wing, Melissa Worrell and Mary Alice Kerwin, and really paved the way for me into in sales, really helped me get to the next level, take on a bigger, more senior territory, kind of raise my overall business acumen, make sure that I was, being a really well-rounded representative of the brand, but then also really nurtured me into sales management and, ensuring that, I wasn't just, thinking about the here and now, but really thinking about what's new, what's next, and kind of helping me realize my potential.
And really being forward thinking. That's great. So you said Melissa and Mary Ann, a shout out, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think they were my first kind of the original, the OG mentors that I had, and so many amazing men and women since.
It's so important, and I think, and that's the one thing I love about the LinkedIn community and the platform. Like, that's the only social media platform I'm on, but there's a great community of mentors that don't necessarily have to be traditional mentors, but then can really I've found more and more people are open to helping if it's really not a pitch. It's really like, I'm looking to better myself and I'm really doing to do better. How did you stay kind of motivated, and what motivates you, because I know you're a working mom, you have some kiddos at home. So how do you kind of stay motivated in that busy life and continue to kind of, have that same drive and energy you had when we worked together?
Absolutely. And I do feel pretty blessed that I have that. Like I just have an energy for helping people and solving problems. I know that seems so, even when I say it, I know it doesn't really sound authentic, but it just is the way it is for me. I love the opportunity to see someone and see their potential and help them identify things that they could be doing differently, doing better. There's no problem that I don't want to get my hands into and think of different ways that we could solve it. And ultimately, I think that that's what drives me the most. I do love a good competition as well. And I have a tendency, to kind of take the most mundane things and turn them into a competition, because
Sure.
I do drive a lot of energy and a lot of motivation from just making anything a competition.
Wow, that's great. You and I have talked a lot about things like empathy and compassion and things of that nature. We're both big fans of Brene Brown and her work on vulnerability as well. How has empathy impacted you? And you shared some examples there with kind of your leaders and at the organization. But how has empathy impacted you both in kind of your personal and your professional life?
That is, I look at empathy as both being my superpower, but also my curse. And that's the place, like when we talk about being mindful and really being focused on the things that matter, empathy is really where it centers for me, because I can really relate to other people. Like once I get that understanding, that little bit of that little glimmer, I just I want to be in partnership. I want to help achieve goals, but at some points you have to focus on really key financial and timeline pieces that don't always allow you to be as fully empathetic as you'd like, and holding people to standards and really coaching, mentoring, but then also disciplining around some of those key things. So I found as I really matured in my leadership, I found that situational leadership is just the most important thing that I can be focused on in terms of managing that line of empathy. Like, you can't always show up for people the exact same way. There, you really do need to start first with meeting people where they are
Yes.
and making sure that you're moving them from that space to the space where you need them to go. But yeah, over the years, that's definitely been my battle, is kind of keeping true to who I am and being
Yep.
that empathetic person, but also, not letting people off the hook.
Yeah.
So
I have a, I've been noodling on this one for a while, because empathy is one of those buzzwords we keep hearing a lot about these days. And like, what is true empathy, and so one thing I had read recently was, and it was more of an inward kind of book. I think it was Suzuki's Beginner's Mind, and he had shared, when you enter a conversation, you actually have to come empty, because if you come with any preconceived
yeah,
history and path, you're not really being empathetic and you're not being present. And more often than not, I might hear a leader say, "Oh, I'm empathetic. I understand the pressures that are tasked upon this individual and the job that." But to me, empathy is really understanding who that person is, not necessarily where they are. And that requires a little, like, us to go a little bit deeper, like thinking about, what is going on in this person's personal life, and what is going on in this person's ecosystem and their department, and so on and so on and so forth. But I think that's sometimes lacking, and so I don't know if you feel the same way.
yeah, I feel like that's probably the big part of the beginning of my career.
Yeah.
Those were the things that I was just trying to shut out. Like, I had my girls, and like, I tried not to even talk about them. Like,
Yeah.
you just want to be a business person and show up and be accountable and be on task and exceed goal. And you really just were kind of coached to say, just kind of keep that stuff to the side. Whereas, I think your point is right on. If you don't know where someone is, if you can't meet them where they
Yeah.
are, you're not going to be able to bring out the best in them, and you're not going to be able to kind of create the dynamic on a team that's needed to bring out the best in that team. And you can
Yeah.
kind of just keep taking that forward. But I couldn't agree more that that's a key piece. But again, organizationally, do you have the infrastructure
Yeah.
to kind of allow people to show up as their full selves and really make them feel part of that bigger team? Because those are the time constraints, economic constraints. You'd love to be able to say to anyone that's having a challenging time, just take the time off.
Yeah.
But backfilling work, and there's very practical things that kind of come with that, allowing someone to be fully show up with whoever they are. It's really interesting too, once you dig into that, the various things that actually do keep people from feeling part of a team.
And
Like,
feeling full. Yeah.
yeah, like for me, it was always about kind of balancing, mom and work. But for so many different people, it's being able to show up and, exhibit, their religion,
Yeah.
or their, the fact that maybe they're single and everybody in the group is married, and how that makes them feel a little bit outside of a conversation. So it's definitely an area, I think, that when leaders get it right,
Yeah.
it really works. But there's so much more work, I think, that we can all be doing to have that better understanding.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to trend in the right direction. Like when you talked about buzzwords like emotional intelligence, EQ training is starting to come out a little bit more. The one that really stood out to me, kind of pivoting slightly, is last quarter I reread both Duckworth and Carol Dweck's work. So two staples, grit and mindset. If you haven't read them, you add them to your must-read list. And it had me really thinking about things from an organizational perspective, which is, hey, we're really, especially in sales and marketing and outcome driven roles, how do we ensure that we're not, limiting our staff and our peers with that fixed mindset habit, and yes, we want to hit our numbers. We have to hit our numbers where we're in performance driven, but we're not really teaching process first and inclusion first and learning first. And I think that's an area I'd really like to see leadership training and coaching added, along with mindset and mindfulness as well, right? So
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised you kind of kept work and personal separate. Like, did you transition and change that over your tenure at The Economist? And, and was there an aha moment that says, you know what, I feel comfortable talking about this? Like, what was there, something that kind of shifted and changed that made you feel more comfortable? Or maybe it was just your group and your tenure at the company?
No, I'm embarrassed to say it, but I kind of had a breaking point,
Yeah.
where I just couldn't keep it all, like the facade kind of cracked. And it just really, I think also I am someone that would always want other people to feel comfortable and to feel like they could bring their whole selves to work. But I held myself kind of at a different level, because I said, oh, well, I'm in charge. I really need to make sure that I'm mirroring, this really efficient, no downtime, kind of leader style. And of course, for my team, I'm accepting of all of the
Yeah.
things that make them a real person, but for me, it has to be different. And I really just hit a point in my career where it was just all too much to kind of
Yeah.
keep up that facade. And it was such a relief to be able to kind of be myself, and need to sneak out for a school appointment, or
Yeah.
what all of the things that you really do need to do to keep that balance and keep home life and work life working in partnership to be the best you, and get the best results.
Yeah, I think I've probably well, one, I applaud you for catching it and seeing it, because I do think when we see leaders, the more human they can be, the easier it is for us to kind of feel like we could be open and speak. I probably limited a lot of my business success because I always put balance at the forefront. So
Ooh.
yeah, because it's, people often talk about work-life balance, but it's not, it's just balance, and we all have to kind of um, plug in our battery, so to speak, in different ways. And family is the most intimate relationships we have. So it's so important to kind of understand that and that's why when we go back to kind of sales, marketing, and outcome driven roles, I always say, the closest example to compare us to is peak performers. And peak performers invest more in rest, recovery, and mindset than most of us do. And why is that? And I think that's just a flaw that we have to. And that's the one thing I would say in the middle of this pandemic we're still in, that I've really enjoyed seeing, is the humanness of children on a Zoom call and dogs showing up and people saying, hey, look, I'm going to be in and out of meetings today because we don't have daycare. And I've actually enjoyed that when, I've had a manager apologizing to me. I says, well, why? No, that's great. Yeah, go spend time with your family. I had a conversation with my son a few years ago. So my son is a freshman in college now. And a few years back, he was a big competitive athlete. And he asked dad, are you disappointed in all that time, energy, and money you invested to like be there for me, but because I don't play sports today? And in immediate, because he's very material wealth driven. So he's looking at, I says, absolutely not. I says, because nobody can take away that time I had. So for me, it's really important for us to know, what do you need to have that balance, to be your full self, so what does balance mean to you, Suzanne?
Yeah, I mean, I am on a constant balance journey.
We all are,
I
though.
really am. And I find, I think that for me, I'm still at a very early stage where I really need to identify the things that power me
Yeah.
and the things that drain me, and make sure that I've kind of managed my schedule along those lines. The schedule has been my kind of balance savior, because if it's not on my calendar, I've really tried not to do it. I used to be the person that would say yes to anything and everything, especially if I thought I could be of help.
Yeah.
But now I've really tried to pivot to a calendar function so I could be more intentional, even with the smallest parts of my day. It's hard though,
Yeah.
because you do get a last minute call that they need some help at school, or there's a business opportunity. Right now I'm kind of doing my own consulting, and what it's like. It's very similar to being back to individual contributor.
Yeah.
You really want to make sure that you're meeting and exceeding all your clients' needs, but you also want to be open to what new business and new opportunities could be out there. So just even that in itself, it's like, oh, but I could. It's like, nope, you're going by going by your calendar, which you intentionally set to, leave time for these things. But it's hard, and it's by no means do I have that mastered yet, but
no,
working on it.
It definitely is. And it's boundaries. It's really knowing like yourself and knowing your energy. One thing I tried to do this year, especially during, kind of this stay at home order that we're all in, was being really protective of energy in, energy out. And so, and that kind of goes into the whole time aspect of things and balance aspect of things. Because at the start of this, I was every morning checking the unfortunate fatality rates and what is going on in the cases. Yeah. And I caught myself after a couple of weeks I just feel like shit, like this is not serving me. And I don't want to, ignorance is bliss, but I says, this isn't serving me. Right. And so only more recently with, the vaccine announcements, I'm starting to dig in a little bit more, but I decided that I was going to be very prescriptive with what my screen time was. So now, I'm pretty good about screen time anyway, but it was like, I'm being very prescriptive with whatever I'm listening to at what part of the day, and even the books. And I just saw this huge change. And I just started to read Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. And it's been recommended several times. I'm finally reading it. And just this morning, I was reading the example where they say they would give individuals a piece of paper with 10 questions, and they'd all have 5 words. And you want them to reword each of these 10 sentences into a 4-word sentence. And they systematically put little things in there like old and gray and tired and fatigued, right? And when somebody would leave that exercise to walk down the hall, they would naturally be walking slower and older. And even though I read it, it didn't surprise me, but it surprised me because this is how subtle the energy in actually impacts how we are in our life. So I think when we talk about boundaries and balance, it's really important that all of us own that on our own. Like you said, being really intentional with the calendar, so that we can be very prescriptive with being our best selves. So.
Yes. And the best self is especially in the times that we're in right now, is much harder. Every day is kind of Blur's day. Everyone's feeling, just that little bit disconnected, that little bit more stressed.
Yes.
And it's been hard. But I agree. I think the other piece is when you're acknowledging it, meeting people, you can really bring each other up. Yes. I've been so lucky throughout this pandemic to have people in my network that just have great energy and want to be putting it out there. And you had mentioned Blink, but I had Leela Berkeley, and another friend and mentor, give me the mindset book a few years ago. And I hadn't read it at the time. Like, it was a very familiar concept at the time, but I hadn't read the book. I feel like that is such an amazing thing to do for someone.
Yeah.
Identify something that they need in their life at that time and get them that book or that article or the video, whatever it is. I feel like that is such a powerful thing to do. And I similarly, gentleman, Todd Krieselman from Media Radar, same thing. I was having a kind of leadership crisis, and he sent me, I think it was the book, The CEO of Zappos.
Okay.
Just thinking differently and, really, really kind of shocking the system. But that's something that I think over the pandemic, to your point about screen time, the kind of the less obsessive viewing and the more intentional and even sharing what you're finding, that's bringing value and bringing energy.
Yeah, that's why honestly I've had, I think I'm a blessing and a curse. I get very deep into certain topics. And so a lot of folks that know that I really love to learn, that says, hey, you should really check out this podcast, or, you should really go down this thought leader. And I just can't consume that much energy. There's so many great newsletters and communities that are popping up that are out there that I wish I could be a part of all of them, but I just know I can't, if I want to really retain this information and apply it to my life. Because I think a lot of people that I respect, that are thought leaders, like Kevin Dorsey's the sales thought leader, and Morgan Ingram, I just spoke with this morning, they talk a lot about, retaining, like there's no good in absorbing this information if we can't retain it and apply it to our lives. So I'm trying to ensure that I'm being very prescriptive with what it is, but it really helps, when, you kind of have that intention and you focus on it. But Suzanne, I'm always curious to ask this question to leaders like yourself. What does leadership mean to you? And what is a good leader in your mind?
So for me personally, it's being and behaving, in a way that someone would want to follow you. It's kind of as simple as that for me. Like I
Yeah.
don't have, I had a vision of what leadership was, and it was definitely not something that I ever aspired to.
Yeah.
It was kind of cutthroat and aggressive and relentless. I interviewed with someone once, and they it was a very competitive field, and they said, we don't want the competition's kids getting Christmas presents. And I'm like, yeah, no, like I'm not there. Like I want to win, I want to do what it takes to win. But yeah, I'm not there. So to me, it's really about emulating someone and kind of embodying someone that not only I want to follow, but that I want to give, this cause or this initiative my best.
Yeah.
So really being able to, kind of paint a picture, point the direction, coach, and kind of get people on board to accomplish a goal together.
Yeah. What are some traits you think are really like non-negotiable when we look at leadership? We've talked about empathy quite a bit, so I would put that one in there. And I'm a big one on a growth mindset, like a learner, somebody that's humble enough to say, I don't know, or like, we got that wrong. Like, not, because the one thing that stood out to me when I reread, because similar to yourself, like I had read Mindset, a long time ago. And I'm surprised I reread things like Think and Grow Rich and Seven Habits quite a bit, but I wish Mindset should be my yearly reread, to be honest. And I just sat there saying, I've totally screwed up my son, like I keep talking about outcome, not process, right? So I think to me, a growth mindset is critical for a leader, but I'd love to hear what some traits you think are kind of non-negotiable.
Yeah, I think the one that's really key for me is trust.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think, empathy. I think the passion is probably also a big piece, like work and passion for something. I think anyone that is kind of a little too focused on themselves, it's really hard to kind of get behind and follow, someone that doesn't have a bigger picture and doesn't want to be achieving bigger things. But yeah, I think the growth mindset is critical. And there's also for me that something about just making the next right step.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just kind of set it and forget it and let other people figure it out. It's I'm going to be ensuring that this vision and this team makes these right decisions to get to where they need to go.
Follows through with it. Yeah.
Follows
Absolutely.
through. Yeah. Is engaged. Engaged is probably another one. I think that you need to stay above it, and you need to make sure that you've got that visibility of what's new, what's next, and what's needed in order to compete. Like that is absolutely critical. But I think part of that is also staying in touch with, the team that you're leading. You really can't do those two things in a vacuum.
So, and this is, we didn't really talk about this, but I'm curious on your thoughts just with your tenure at The Economist. I know mentorship was really critical for your growth and for your career development. And it's also really important to you personally in kind of giving back, kind of the Denzel reach one, teach one. And I love that about you. And I love that just in general for folks that do that. What does mentorship mean to you, and why is it so important for you to ensure that you are now, reaching back out and helping younger professionals as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's purely selfish. It seems nice on the surface, but it is, gives me so much energy to talk to somebody and like kind of learn about what they're facing, how it's the same as something I might have faced, or how it's different, because of the time that we're living in, and be able to share similar experiences, or really just listen to them and coach them in a way where you're watching them solve their own problems, kind of taking away their excuses and solving their own problems. And I just get so much energy from it. I learn so much. Like I was, there's a woman, Marie Dene, that I'm working with, the Curvy Fashionista. And we were talking, she wanted a little some advice about something, which was not really that consequential. But in the span of the time, she basically educated me in a whole new way about email marketing. And I'm like, well, I hope you got some benefit out of this discussion, because, this was amazing for me. So yeah, I'm selfishly loving the time that I'm able to carve out right now.
Yeah,
To
service to others is always something that edifies and gives back. There's something I heard recently. I don't know where I picked it up, but it said if you are a 40 plus professional, you need to have a mentor that's in their 20s. And this is
Oh, I love
I
that.
know, and I says yeah because it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of doing things, and I'm the old fogey that's still hardwired into doing things in old ways. So that one is interesting to me. I know as we're kind of coming up on time, I always like to ask a couple questions, but Suzanne, how do you aim to kind of inspire and motivate others? Kind of that might be the mentorship or just in general.
Yeah, I mean, I do I want to emulate what I think is good and be a good person. We only have so much time, and I feel like that's first and foremost what you want to focus on is like the human experience, human interaction, and just leaving people feeling better than before you met them.
Yes.
So that's the kind of key thing. But I think over the course of my career, I've been taught and I've found it really beneficial when you're able to take people's excuses away from them.
Oh, that's great.
And it's harsh sometimes, and I don't do harsh well, but I definitely have seen the benefits of watching someone give their excuses, the reason that they haven't lost the weight or haven't looked for the new job or haven't done this or haven't done that, and really just let them realize for themselves that they're all just excuses. Yep. And the things that they can be doing to kind of get on the path that they want to be on.
It reminds me of something.
That's a big one for me. Just take away the excuses and do it in a loving way. Do it in a loving and supportive way.
Yeah, no. And it sometimes is tough to be critical of those you care the most about, and you have to, kind of shake the tree, so to speak. I was listening to something Seth Godin said recently, and he's and I just really getting into him recently, but I don't know how. I've kind of, like I said, I can only consume so much, and I tried to bucket it, but he had shared something where he's got a course to help people write, and he had said that often people say, well, I can't write, and he says, well, show me your bad writing. And he talks about this course he had for 90 days where they're not writers, by trade, but it's a part of his curriculum. And they wrote every day for 90 days. But on top of that, he says on average, they would get 500 pieces of feedback a month. And I just thought about that. And I says, imagine how much of an impact it would have if we actually asked for that much feedback. So even this morning, like, cause I'm working on a project, I'd called Morgan and I says, hey, can I volunteer you to kind of give me some feedback if I send you some stuff, right? Because, it is important to call people out on it, but also call ourselves out on it as well. So we can really be critical. Well, yeah. Suzanne, one thing I always like to ask anybody that comes on the show is like, what's one piece of advice you would give kind of a younger professional or a younger you that you think would really help offer impact and kind of help you with this kind of trajectory of being your better self, focusing on, kind of growth in the business space? Like what, I'd love to hear any input you have or any tactics that anybody could apply kind of immediately into their life.
Sure. I mean, there's like so many things that I'd want to tell my younger self. Number one,
I know, right?
Including like just sunscreen all the time and stay out of the sun. But actually, I think I have a fabulous coach, Gerasimo, who recently asked me, what are the 5 things that you would do if you couldn't fail? What would those 5 things be? And it's not something that I've ever taken the time to think about or do, but it's, I think, something that I should probably be doing, every quarter or at least every year. Because I think it kind of helps you prioritize things and holds you accountable for making the progress on the stuff that you aspire to. So that would probably be the one thing. There's something about just keeping your sight on the future, not in I want to be, a VP or a president or a CEO and only have that as your goal. Like, I feel like you need to be thinking more broadly about what you want to achieve with your time, here on earth.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of do it in a way that maybe is a bit more audacious.
Yeah, like I forget who said it, but if your goal doesn't scare you, it's not big enough.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, Judith, I recently met Judith Hammerman of Adobe, who, you know, gave me kind of a quick kind of mentoring coaching session. And her big takeaway for me was continue to find the things that make you uncomfortable.
Yes.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's when you know you're really, really stretching yourself.
Yeah, it's like what Ryan Holiday, Stoic author, says: the obstacle is the way, right? So, well, Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on. And, you know, it's always great to chat with you. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about the work you're doing? Where can people look you up?
Yeah, I mean, on LinkedIn, I'm Suzanne Hopkins-Oldak, Oldak. I am very open to kind of 15-minute mentoring sessions, or, you know, anything that I can be doing. My goal, like I said, is really just to kind of give back all of the wonderful advice and guidance that I've had. So LinkedIn is the best way. And I look forward to staying engaged. I want to come when you have Morgan on next. I want to come back and be your co-host.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll tell him that, because he was the first person that I had on. And like I said, I was really excited to have you here in December, because you did definitely, like, I have shared that story quite a bit of you challenging me, just because I am so in my lane, and you kind of like you opened up a door, which is great, you know. So for those that haven't, please check out Suzanne, follow her on LinkedIn. She's doing a lot of great work, and you definitely take her up on those 15 minutes, because I know how important that is to you and the impact you have. So thank you again for coming on, everybody. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and share. Thanks for listening in.
Thanks so much.